Do you remember the moment your financial optimism died? For most of the English-speaking world, we were raised on a simple economic promise. If you work hard, save diligently, and respect the institutions, the system will protect you. We believed we were living in the age of stability, the American century, the final chapter of progress. But look around you now. Do you feel stable? Do you feel protected? Or do you feel a suffocating weight, a debt burden, an invisible tax, an inflation that steals your future while politicians tell you the economy is strong? This is not a coincidence. What you are experiencing is not a crisis, but a predictable, measurable phase in the life cycle of a global superpower. For 5 centuries, empires have followed the same 7-stage pattern of decline. From Spain to Britain, from the Ottomans to the Soviet Union, the pattern never fails. And the most terrifying fact of our modern reality is this: the United States of America is now demonstrably nearing stage 5, and if you are living in any nation tethered to the dollar, your future is caught in its gravitational pull. The question is not if the pattern will claim the current financial order, but when and whether you will be prepared for the reckoning when the final stages are reached. To understand where we are, we must discard the propaganda of the present and consult the brutal history of money and power. The 7-stage decline pattern is an economic and sociological map, charting the life of a global reserve power from its inception as a disciplined, innovative republic to its demise as an over-leveraged, conflict-ridden empire. It begins with the simple, necessary foundations of power: a strong education system, low debt, a reliable currency, and ends with internal conflict, lost wars, and hyperinflation. But the most crucial inflection point, the moment the pattern becomes irreversible, is always financial. It is the moment the dominant power shifts from saving and sound money to spending and unbridled debt. Our story begins long before the modern era, with an empire that taught the world the first unforgiving lesson about leveraging resource wealth: the Spanish Empire. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Spain was the global titan, flush with staggering quantities of silver and gold ripped from the New World. This was wealth unimaginable to its European rivals. Yet this influx of precious metal was not treated as a foundation for conservative strength. It was treated as endless collateral for endless ambition. The Spanish crown, drunk on New World bullion, borrowed relentlessly to fund wars across Europe, building a military apparatus so vast it required a financial engine that literally did not exist. The consequence was inevitable: 4 separate state bankruptcies in the 16th century alone. Spain, the empire overflowing with the world's most desired commodity, drowned in debt because its leaders mistook ambition for reality. That is the first universal truth of the decline pattern. Even an empire stuffed with gold can be destroyed when ambition outpaces means. This set Spain irrevocably on the path to stage 5, losing its technological and military edge because its treasury was perpetually bankrupt. This financial collapse paved the way for the next global power, the British Empire. The transition to British dominance, the Pax Britannica, was defined not by Spanish silver, but by sophisticated debt management and, crucially, the gold standard. For nearly a century leading up to 1914, the British pound sterling was the undisputed anchor of global trade. The British state borrowed, but it did so judiciously, with the City of London operating as a financial hub built on trust and the promise that paper could always be exchanged for gold. This era represented the peak of stage 3 for the English-speaking world: high global influence, competitive education, and strong currency discipline. It was a golden age of financial stability, but it was stability built on a finite resource: gold, and a political commitment that was about to be obliterated by the cost of total war. When the lamps went out across Europe in 1914, the financial math of the British Empire changed instantly. The initial belief that the Great War would be over by Christmas led to a fatal miscalculation. Governments thought they could pay for the conflict with traditional means. They were wrong. The war began burning money faster than all the gold reserves in Europe combined could sustain. Britain's war costs soon reached millions of pounds every single day. The math was merciless. Within weeks, the major powers, including Britain, abandoned the gold standard, quietly confessing to their citizens that their money was no longer backed by metal, but only by faith in the state. This moment, the severing of the gold anchor, was the definitive, irreversible descent into stage 4 for the British Empire. Money was now unchained, driven by printing presses and credit, and once the government tasted that freedom, they never went back. To keep the war machine running, Britain and France desperately turned to the only source of capital not yet ruined, the officially neutral United States of America. Wall Street became the financial lifeline of the Allied cause, arranging vast loans. By 1917, the financial power had already shifted. The United States emerged from the war fundamentally transformed, from a debtor nation to the world's largest creditor, from a financial follower to the undisputed global leader. The British Empire may have won the war, but it lost the financial century, burdened by crushing debt owed to its successor, the new empire across the Atlantic. This was the great financial inheritance, a vast system of global debt and a history of moral hazard that was passed from London to Washington, and it set the stage for the American century, a century that now faces the very same trap. The baton was passed in 1944. At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the United States, holding 2/3 of the world's gold, wrote the rules. The US dollar became the global reserve currency, convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce, and other currencies pegged themselves to the dollar. This was the zenith of stage 3 for the American empire: high global influence, an unassailable currency, and the universal trust of its peers. The American century was born. But as history teaches us, the temptation to spend beyond one's means, to leverage power for immediate political gain, never fades. The cost of the Vietnam War and massive domestic spending programs meant the United States began printing more dollars than it had gold to back. Foreign governments, seeing the excess, started demanding gold in exchange for the paper dollars they held. The trust was evaporating. Then came the quiet, seismic shift that defines our modern financial reality. August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon, facing an unavoidable drain on the US gold reserves, unilaterally slammed the door shut, ending the dollar's link to gold entirely. This moment was the most important financial revolution of the last century. Debt was now completely untethered. Governments could borrow and print money at will, limited only by the trust of their creditors, not by any physical constraint like gold. The finite nature of money was gone, replaced by the infinite. This was the United States' definitive descent into stage 4, the peak of debt and financialization. This is the very same trick mastered by ancient Rome. Roman emperors, facing crushing military expenses, began reducing the silver content of the denarius, quietly imposing a silent tax on their population. The American parallel is precise. The US government simply replaced the physical debasement of silver with the virtual debasement of printing vast quantities of paper and digital currency. The subsequent decades saw the explosion of global debt to levels no civilization has ever carried before. The US financial system, and by extension the entire Anglosphere tethered to it, is now steeped in stage 5, the era of excessive debt and money creation. The US national debt is staggering, the currency's value is constantly being eroded by policy, and the political establishment, much like the late Roman emperors, has lost the will to enforce discipline. We are watching the predictable, irreversible decay of the core currency that underpins the English-speaking world. The symptoms are no longer abstract. They are the reality of life. Infrastructure decay, unprecedented wealth inequality, and political polarization that has made governance functionally impossible. These are not political problems first. They are the societal consequences of a broken financial system where leaders continue to fund ambition through the silent tax of currency debasement. This is the path to stage 6, internal disorder and external challenge, where external powers start to aggressively challenge the reserve currency status, sensing the weakness of a fading power. The trajectory is clear. The US is following the path carved out by Spain, the Netherlands and Britain: excessive debt, military overstretch, and the steady collapse of currency confidence. The lesson of history is harsh but necessary. No empire, no nation, no system has escaped a reckoning with debt. The timelines vary, but the destination is always the same. Stage 7 is loss of reserve status and total system reset, where the debt mountain causes a sudden catastrophic crisis and the system cracks. The only choice you have is whether you face that inevitable cycle blind or fully awake. The system is rigged to protect itself, not you. Therefore, the only true financial defense is to recognize what survives when the paper promises and the digits on a screen finally lose their meaning. History shows that when money collapses, real wealth is what endures. Tangible assets that hold value across cycles, productive skills that can still provide for a community, and knowledge that allows you to see through the illusions of the state. The survivors of every collapse, from ancient Rome to modern hyperinflation zones, were not the ones who trusted institutions most, but the ones who doubted first. If you want to avoid paying for the mistakes you never made, you must strip away the illusions, recognize the tricks, and build a fortress of real value that stands outside the predictable decline pattern of empires. The history does not repeat, but if you ignore it, it will crush you all the same. The clock is ticking towards stage 6, and your preparation is your only defense.